So I have a question for all of you. Since this is a conference focused on health, you should find the answer pretty easy. And the question is very simple. How many organs are there in your body right now? Well, I asked the same question to 3 doctor friends of mine and they were not sure. So I asked my most trusted friend for these kind of questions, Miss Google. And Miss Google told me there are 78 organs in the human body, depending on how you count, but that is the most generally accepted answer. So today I want to introduce you to the 79th organ in our body, created not by nature, but entirely by human beings. This thing here. Now, does that shock you? Well, if you have any kind of phone, pull it out in your hand and let me introduce you to this new organ in your body and why it works like an organ. First of all, it has a skin, right? Because you touch it, it responds. It has ears because you speak to it, it seems to understand you. It has a voice because it can talk back to you. It has eyes with which it can recognize faces and objects. It clearly has a brain because I don't know about your smartphone, but my smartphone is a lot smarter than I am. And it must have a heart, feelings, emotions. Otherwise, why else would we carry it close to our heart? Sleep with it next to our bedside all the time and spend most of our day lost deeply in prayer. You can put your phones by, but make sure you keep it close to your heart. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I don't trust this Gopi guy. He's the Google guy. I'm already driven to distraction by these objects, and he's the drug dealer pushing more of these onto us. And I've got these flames of distraction going on in my heart with all of these devices, and he's pouring gasoline onto these flames. But seriously, we have created an amazingly, amazingly interconnected society. And let me give you some of the statistics. There are 7 billion people on this planet, roughly, and 2 billion are on the internet. And there are 6 billion actually, almost 6 billion cell phones. And all of this, let me just check my slides here. And with all of these devices spread among our human population, we have had some profound impact. And I came to a certain realization about this impact 4 months ago. I was standing in a place called Chittalangeri. It's a small village, a rice farming village in southern India. And this is where I had this epiphany. Now, Chittalangeri occupies a very soft spot in my heart because it's also my home village. It's where my grandparents lived as poor rice farmers. It is also the same village where my parents lived most of their life, or at least grew up there under modest circumstances, without electricity, without running water, and without the benefit of a college education. And yet they went on to create the circumstances so that their 4 children, between us, could earn 10 college degrees, including 2 US Ivy League MBAs, even though my parents had never set foot in America. So you might wonder what caused that kind of mobility in one generation. It was simply access to information and education. A few months ago, I had gone back with my parents and my siblings back to our home village for a little ceremony at the local village temple, or our family temple. And while there, I couldn't help but look at the village school where my mother studied. It looked pretty much the same like when my mother was in the school. But for one difference. For kids in that school and tens of thousands of other schools like that all over the world, it doesn't have to be just in India, if they have access to computers, these kids now have access to the same amount of information as somebody who goes to Harvard or Oxford. We are leveling the playing field for information for all of humanity with these technologies. And there was one more fact that struck me as I was walking through these paddy fields talking to many of the villagers that I'd grown up with, that I'd known most of my life. When I was growing up, I would spend most of my summers in this village in Chitlanjeri with my grandparents. And back then, this entire village of 20,000 people had 3 telephones with 2-digit numbers. So can you imagine the fight for a world with just 2-digit telephone numbers and the fight for vanity numbers? And back then, I considered myself a child prodigy. Did I go off mic? Am I back on? Yeah. Back then, I considered myself a child prodigy because I carried the entire phone book for a village of 20,000 people in my head. And I still do. 31, 32, and 33. But 6 months ago, when I was walking along Chitlanjeri, I looked around and I was astonished that half the village seemed to be carrying this little organ at the end of their hands. Because the penetration in India is now 89%. India has almost 1 billion cell phones. And it struck me that any one of these villagers that I'd known who are now carrying cell phones could pull out this amazing organ that has sprouted at the end of their hands, punch in 15 digits, and can be instantly connected with anybody in this room or on this planet. Imagine that for a minute. We are all just 15 digits away from 6 billion of our brethren. That kind of connectivity is unprecedented in humanity. That is an amazing, astonishing power that we have distributed to all of the human population. The question is, what are we doing with that power? What kind of things are happening? One of the magical things that is happening as a result of that kind of connectivity is that we are raising our collective consciousness. And I'll give you one example. What we are doing is we're taking all of our knowledge as much as possible and making it freely available to each other in magical ways. So I'm going to tell you a small story, or actually show you a video to illustrate that in action. So from the rice fields of Chitlanjeri, come with me on this journey, where I'm going to take you to Soy, Kenya. Oops, I went back too fast. Where we'll meet a farmer called... So from Chitlanjeri, I want to take you to... The slides are taking some time advancing. To Soy, Kenya, where I want to introduce you to a farmer called Zach Mater.
Not long ago, I planted a crop of potatoes. Then suddenly they started dying one after the other. Checked out the books and they didn't tell me much. So I went and I did the search. Potato diseases. One of the websites told me that ants could be the problem. It said sprinkle wood ash over the plants. Then after a few days, the ants disappeared. I got excited about the internet. I have this friend who really would like to expand his business. So we went with him to the cyber cafe and we checked out several sites. When I met him next, he was going to put a windmill at a local school. I felt proud because something that wasn't there before was suddenly there. I realized that not everybody can be able to access what I was able to access. I thought that I need to have an internet that my grandmother can use. And so I thought about a notice board, a simple wooden notice board. When I get information on my phone, I'm able to post the information on the notice board. So it's basically like a computer. I use the internet to help people. I think I'm searching for a better life for me and my neighbors. So many people have access to information, but there's no follow-up to that. I think a follow-up to that is our knowledge. When people have the knowledge, they can find solutions without having to be helped out.
So Zach says, when people have knowledge, they can find solutions to problems without being helped out. And that's one of the amazing things that all of the technologies that we are building are doing for all of humanity. And sometimes we can use these technologies to solve some extraordinary problems, overcoming borders, overcoming geopolitics. And I want to tell you another story to illustrate how that works. So from Chitlanjeri to Soy, Kenya, I'm now going to take you to Cape Town in South Africa and to Dharamsala in India and tell you something that happened last October. At Google, I work on a product called Google+, and one of its capabilities is that it allows all of humanity to talk to each other face-to-face for free using video. Anybody can get on it. Multiple people can get and talk to each other. And it's a service that is available as part of Google+. Some of you may have used it. Last September, I set an intention as part of the launch for this product. And the intention is one of the kind of crazy ideas that we are encouraged to think about at Google. And the intention was, how about getting His Holiness the Dalai Lama onto Google+, and get him on a video conference using Google+ Hangouts with his best friend, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and have a dialogue on peace and compassion. Actually, the original idea was that the two of them, along with two other Nobel laureates, and I wanted to bring in 4 terrorists, now reformed, so that they could have this really epic conversation. It's a really ridiculous idea, right? Except that at Google, you get taken seriously. So I was told, yes, go do it. Make it happen. And I didn't know where to start. And I wrote it on a piece of paper and shared it with Google's CMO. Sometimes when you set these intentions and put it out there, the universe mystically aligns and doors open for you. What happened next was amazing, and it still makes me reel in astonishment. 4 days after I put that on a piece of paper, my phone rang at 1:30 in the morning. It was a call from South Africa from a person I'd never met before. His name was Jonathan Radenoff, and this is what Jonathan had to say. He said, Gopi, I'm so sorry to call you. I know it's kind of late there, and we've never talked before. True story. He said, but we just had a call from the Desmond Tutu Peace Center, and they have a problem. Archbishop Desmond Tutu's 80th birthday celebrations are coming up, and they've invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama to come and give the International Peace and Compassion Lecture, but the local government is not granting him a visa for geopolitical reasons, and you can guess where that was coming from. Therefore, I'm wondering, that technology that you guys are building, is there some way we could use it to solve this particular problem? See how things align? And now this is a technology we're building. We had kind of tested it once or twice, and he was asking us to put it on the world stage with the Archbishop and His Holiness, both using it for almost the very first time. But nothing fires up people, me and my colleagues, like being champions for human rights and free speech and democracy and just doing what is absolutely right in the universe. So I asked Jonathan, how many weeks do we have to make all of this happen? And he said, 3 days. Because this thing was going to take place on Saturday. And apparently my answer was, I completely forgotten it, but Jonathan tells me that my response was, well, Jonathan, around here, the impossible we do in a day or two. The miracles take a little longer, like 3 days. Leave it with me and let me see what I can do. So went to work on this, spoke to my colleagues, and 60 hours after we had this original request, the Dalai Lama stepped in front of a computer in his living room in Dharamsala. Archbishop Desmond Tutu sat in front of a computer at the University of Cape West in South Africa, in Cape Town. And with the rest of the world witnessing on the internet, this is what the world saw, and I'll show you a few minutes of this video.
Now this I really very much enjoy. You see, although physically long distance, but I can see your face.
I just wanted to find out from you, why does the Chinese government fear you?
Some Chinese officials describe me as a demon. I immediately respond, yes, I have a phone.
How do we learn how to build a culture of peace?
It's actually very straightforward. Let women take over.
Your Holiness, I would like to ask you one more thing. If you were going to give a gift from your heart to your very special 80-year-old friend here,
please live long. Your 90th birthday, I'm looking forward. At that time, don't forget, send me invitation. Then we can test your government.
To me, what was really poignant about this story was this. I'd met the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala a year before that, before I had said this intention. And in my conversation with him, the one thing that had struck me was that this is the 14th Dalai Lama. The previous 13 Dalai Lamas had almost never left Tibet. It's a landlocked country. They had never traveled outside. The 14th Dalai Lama has almost never lived in Tibet. In fact, the statement he said was, when I was 4, I lost my freedom. When I was 14, I lost my country. So he's almost never lived there. He's 77 years old. And yet now he's using the benefit of these technologies that we're building to reach a global audience and get his message of peace and compassion out there so that all of us can have access to his wisdom. And just one statistic will astonish you. In September, when we set him up on Google Plus so that he could do this, he had one person following him. It was me, right? Because I had to test this thing out to see if it'll work the next day. As of yesterday, he has 1.7 million, which is more than the number of people following Sergey Brin, the founder of Google. And that is fantastic that he can now reach a global audience like this. So, whatever I've showed you now about this amazing effects of all of these technology, the benefits it's bringing to humanity, that is all fantastic news. But there is one problem in the midst of all this. And that's what I really want to talk about and how we address it. And the problem is this. So all of these technologies do amazing things. I told you the story of my parents, my village, my Zach Mater, Dalai Lama, etc. But these things can also drive us to distraction with their pings, with their tweets, with all of this interruptions coming towards us. And it's relentless. By the time this conference is over, each of you probably will have hundreds of emails waiting for you, and you go back, open up your inbox, and you're groaning. Status messages don't seem to get the fact that it's Saturday and that you need to take a break, that's a Sabbath. And there's no dial to turn it down. You don't have the option of saying, I will take a little less of it. If you get onto this technology, it just seems to come at you with a relentless pace. But even as we get enamored by this technology and see all of the benefits and how it is impacting the world's humanity, this technology that have been built over the last 10, 20 years or so, there is one piece of technology that is older than that is universally available to every single human being that I believe is the most important technology that we are aware of. And it's equally available to a Kenyan tribesman in the Masai Mara as it is to a CEO like Chip Conley. And what is it? It is our brain, along with our breath, our body, our consciousness, what I call our inner net, which is far more sophisticated, far more useful to us than the internet. In fact, if the internet doesn't function well, if it is not optimized, then it doesn't matter what kind of sophisticated internet you have out there. But for this technology to be in a state of peak performance, it needs its moments of quiet. It needs its periods of mindfulness. But unfortunately, all these other technologies we get enamored with their pings and the tweets and the rings pull us in one direction, pull us in the opposite direction. And sometimes we have to pause, unplug from the internet, step back, and plug into what I call the inner net. And I do this every single day, and I've kind of developed some techniques over time. And I want to share with you my 5 rituals of how I deal with it. Because for better or for worse, the career choice I made, I walked right into the lion's den, right? I live in Silicon Valley. I work at a place like Google, so I'm surrounded by these things. I'm hit on all sides. I'm assaulted by the demands of this technology. And periodically, I need to unplug and step back and bring into my life certain practices to make sure I'm nurturing this more sophisticated technology, the internet as I call it. So here are my 5 rituals. First one is focus on the essential. As German philosopher Goethe said, things that are more important should not be at the mercy of things that are less important. Things that are more important should not be at the mercy of things that are less important. So how many essentials do you need in your life? Start with 1 or maybe 3. In my case, I put together 5. A few years ago, I went and lived in went and stayed for a few days in a monastery, in a Camel Dolly's hermitage. And while I was there, I wrote what I had a startup company at the time, which had a business plan, and I thought to myself, my company has a business plan, don't I need a business plan for myself? So I wrote my business plan, or you might call it a mission statement, and I wanted to get it down to 1 sheet of paper, so I could look at the sheet of paper and say, these are my essentials. And I still wasn't happy with it. I wanted to distill it down. So I distilled it down to 5 words. And for all these 12 years or so, I carry those 5 words on my fingertips so that at any point in time, my energy, my life energy is focused on those 5 essentials so that I can say no to all those other distractions. So the first question I want you to ask is, what are your essentials in your life? 1, 3, maybe 5 that you want to focus on. The second ritual I use is do 1 thing at a time. None of this is new, right? The Buddha has been saying this for 2,000-3,000 years, and all philosophers have been saying this. Do 1 thing at a time. I look around at my place and work, and I've tried doing multiple things in the hope of getting more efficiency. There are times when I've gone into a meeting, and I'm trying to pay attention to the person who's presenting. Does this sound familiar? While I'm trying to answer an email, respond to 2 or 3 chat windows, eating lunch at the same time. By the time the meeting is over, I can't remember what exactly was discussed. I've sent an embarrassing chat in the wrong window. Does that happen to you? She forgave me. And I spilled food on the keyboard, and I still can't remember what I had for lunch. It is a curse of what Linda Stone called continuous partial attention that is almost like a disease that has gripped us. The only thing that seems to work, I figured out after experimenting with this, do 1 thing at a time, and you actually can get that thing done and get that thing done well. The third simple ritual that I've adopted that seems to work well to cope with all of this technology assault is 1 minute of mindfulness every day. Whatever mindfulness may be for you. It might be singing, it might be prayer, it might be meditation, it might be yoga, it might be going for a walk. So in my own case, I've committed to 1 minute of yoga and 1 minute of meditation every day. Now that should strike you as the most ridiculous idea that you've heard at this conference. You should ask Ted for your money back. But years ago, when I was growing up in India, I'd been initiated by my guru, I'd got a mantra, I'd been taught to meditate, and shortly after that I went and lived in a yoga ashram and became a yoga teacher when I was still in high school. So I had this idealistic notion that every day I should do 1 hour of yoga and at least 30 minutes of meditation. Otherwise, I'm not a good person. But the actual number of days I was able to achieve that goal was almost 0. And I had a good reason. Who has the time? 90 minutes. And I was struggling with this till I met my good friend, Meng at Google, the jolly good fellow who wrote the book Search Inside Yourself, in case you're familiar with it. And I discussed with Meng this particular struggle. And Meng said, Gopi, why don't you start with 1 breath? Because even if you're trying to meditate for 60 minutes, it's really 600 breaths strung together. So see if you can get done for one breath and go on to the next breath. Now, since I'm a compulsive neurotic overachiever, I said I can exceed that more than one breath. I can do 1 full minute. So that's how I started this goal of 1 minute of yoga, 1 minute of meditation. But the minute I set that goal, something changed inside of me. Because now there was no day in my life when I could say that I don't have 60 seconds. Even this morning, and before I came up for this, I had a very short window of time before I came from my hotel onto the stage, but I could easily say, yeah, I have 1 minute to meditate, I have 1 minute to do yoga. So a week went by, a month went by, and for the first time in my life, I looked back and I felt like I had meditated and done yoga every single day in my life. I felt like there was integrity towards that commitment. But something else happened that was even more important that I didn't realize. On many days, I would sit for 1 minute of meditation, a minute would go by, and then I would ask myself, this is so beautiful, feels so wonderful. What else is there that is so important that I am going to rush off to? So I would sit for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, on some days 10 minutes. And last Saturday, and actually I was in front of Amma during her program in San Ramon, I ended up sitting for 2 hours. So start with 1 minute, 1 minute of mindfulness. The third ritual I want to tell you about is appointments for mindfulness. So make some sort of a standing commitment on your calendar, book some time that is completely non-negotiable. You cannot erase that particular appointment. Start with just one thing on your calendar that is for you to nurture this technology that nothing can move or change. In my case, there are 3. There are 3 items on my calendar that are completely non-negotiable. One of them is leading a yoga class at Google. I'm a yoga teacher. I also teach at Google. It's a program I created 6 years ago. It's for Googlers, and therefore the program is called Yoglers. I teach every Monday morning at 5:30 on the Google campus. And for 6 years that I've been there, I have never missed a class. Because that is my one non-negotiable appointment in the calendar. Unless I'm traveling, in which case I make sure there is a sub and they lead the class and I still do my practice wherever I am. So I've taught in the Google offices in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Buenos Aires, because that's my non-negotiable commitment. So the question I'm asking you is, what are your non-negotiables? The 5th ritual that I want to leave you with is friend yourself. Now, all of us are proud of the fact that we have thousands of people following us on Twitter or the number of likes we have on Facebook, which is all great. But this technology has allowed us to have this amazing relationships with people across borders, numbering in the thousands now, or tens of thousands. But the most important relationship we can have is the one with ourselves. The most important relationship you can have is the one with yourself. So by friend yourself, what I'm saying is listen to the tweet of your heartbeat, listen to the status update from your brain, listen to the chat request from your body, and make sure you're connected with this inner technology. So to wrap up, these 5 essentials, my message to you is very simple. Humanity is innovating and adopting these amazing internet technologies at a rapid pace. And these technologies are transforming how we live, play, and interact with each other in an astonishing pace. And it is connecting, at this point, 6 billion human beings at a level that we have not seen before. And it is putting power in the hands of ordinary people, whether it's the people in my village, or whether it's Zach Mater in Kenya, or whether it's the Dalai Lama overcoming the limitations of exile and geopolitics. It is touching all of humanity in an amazing way. But even in the midst of all this, the one thing we should care deeply about is the fact that the most important technology that we have to work with is right here: our body, our brain, our breath, our consciousness. And unless we nurture and take care of this inner net, the rest of it doesn't matter. So the question I leave you with is, what rituals are you going to adopt today, either these 5 or something else that is appropriate for you, that will put your internet in a state of peak performance.